All right, we are less than 2 weeks from the presidential election. The deep state is not happy with Donald Trump. People in Washington, D.C., not happy with Donald Trump. The media is not happy with Donald Trump. I'm going to go through some of the biggest stories in the news. To help me do that, I have journalist and columnist Lee Smith with me. Lee, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for inviting me on today to be with you and your great audience.
So let me give my audience some background. You're a columnist for Tablet Magazine. You're also an author and writer. You have a book coming out called Disappearing the President. You also had a book that was very well received, Plot Against the President. That did so well that they made it into a documentary movie, which my wife and I watched, and I highly recommend that to my audience. I want to jump in on something really quickly. I recently did an interview with the vice president of Rasmussen polling, Mark Mitchell. He said, as he digs through the data, he sees two things happening. He said, life is becoming more unbearable under Democrat leadership and ideology. This is why Trump is surging as a populist leader. He also said, independent of that, the country is becoming more conservative. Any thoughts on either of those ideas?
Well, I mean, I follow Mark Mitchell on Twitter, and I find his observations, especially heading into a very important election, really, really helpful and really insightful. So he's terrific, and I agree. I agree with what he told you. I mean, I guess I might just shade it a little bit and say I don't know if the country's becoming more conservative. Or if the country is rebelling more and more against what are frankly, and I hesitate to even call them left-wing or insane policies. I mean, when we're talking about opening up the border, I don't think you have to be a conservative to say, I think that we shouldn't have an open border. I think that most countries have borders, and we should be among those nations that have borders. So I don't think that's an especially right-wing position. Even now, I think it's pretty normal. And I think people are starting to wake up and say, well, wait a minute, I can't help but look at news reports, whether it's in my newspaper or podcast, like you or Stephen, and say, I think there are problems coming from open borders, whether this is crime or whether this amount of taxpayer resources, taxpayer money that is being used to provide these resources to people who have no claim on our country. So that I thank goodness for the fact that so many Americans do appear to recognize what's happening, and they're rebelling against it in the best way that Americans have, which is through the vote.
Yeah, I hate to be crass, but I agree with you. My audience, they're pissed as hell that we're being invaded, that we're being invaded, and they're using our tax dollars to invade us. Right. I mean, what a slap in the face. Like, you take my money and then try to, I don't know if the word replace is too strong, but certainly rebuild an entirely different demographic by taking me over, using my own money against me. And yet there's almost nothing we can do. At least that's the vibe that I get as I read the news, and also I read my audience comments.
Well, I mean, it's shocking because, one of the things that struck me, and I do write about I do write about the immigration stuff. I do write about the open borders here and disappearing the president. I'll just hold it up briefly, and then I'll just say, I think they did a really nice job on the design here. Yeah, that's a great cover. Encounter Books. I'll just say that, one of the shocking things, and I'm sure you're finding this as well with your audience and friends and neighbors and relatives, there is no indication when they might close the borders, right? Do they have a number in mind? I mean, will they close the borders when 25 million people have crossed illegally and they believe that they can flood swing states with Democratic Party with new clients? Because that's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about regular voters, American voters. We're talking about clients, right? People whose mode of existence will be paid for by the Democratic Party so long as they're loyal to the party. Or will they simply keep the borders open forever? And these are the ideas. These are the things that that are keeping regular Americans up at night. It's terrifying. It's not just the crime rates. It's the idea that our country is being transformed before our eyes. And as you say, Stephen, using our own money, and we appear, no one voted for this, right? So it appears to be going on way above our heads, and we have no say in it, of course. But that is what the 2024 election is about: Americans having a say in our borders.
Yeah. Barack Obama said something very interesting this week at a rally for Kamala Harris. He said, of course, as a party, we're against illegal immigration,
right?
But Americans aren't having babies.
Yeah.
And so we have to have legal immigrants coming in. Right. But his party is not pro-family. Right. His party is pro-abortion. His family is pro-illegal immigration. Right. So it's almost like he's blaming the American people and saying, well, we have to replace you with people that will have babies. But like, it's the Republican Party that has more children per couple than Democrats. And then they try to steal our children when they go off to college with new ideas, new ideology. What are your thoughts on Obama blaming Americans and saying we have to have illegal immigration?
Well, I believe that Bill Clinton said the same thing, and it's not surprising that recently on campaign for Harris. And this is not surprising, given that this is obviously what the Democratic Party is doing. And Stephen, you hit on a really important point. When people talk about replacement rates in the United States, as it turns out, it's the Democratic Party that has that is not reproducing at a replacement rate. Conservatives, the right, certainly is. But I think there's a way that all of America could be encouraged to have larger families, could be encouraged to have children, to wed earlier, and that is with different policies, encouraging marriage, encouraging children's. But of course, this is precisely what the Democratic Party has been fighting against. And we can talk about it on a cultural and social level, but let's just talk about it on an economic level right now. And that is, look, it's very hard. It's become increasingly harder for Americans to support their families when we have illegal immigration that is depressing wages for Americans. So that's another slap in the face. It's not just that they're using our money to bring in illegal aliens, but they're depressing the wages of working Americans, right? And saying, yeah, you're not raising children, so I'm sorry, we have to replace you. And look, by the way, the United States is not primarily an economy; it's a country, right? It's made up of our families, it's made up of our friends, it's made up of our neighbors. That's what we look around and see, right? Not the economy. So the most important thing about the country is not simply it's not the GDP, it's the welfare of Americans. And of course, the Democratic Party does not care about that at all. And unfortunately, there's not been a lot of concern from the Republican side either, until Donald Trump, who has made the case for Americans, American families, American workers. So I'm very satisfied that the Democrats are going around slapping Americans in the face saying, yeah, sorry for sticking it to you, but you're not having enough kids. I hope Americans are listening to that message and acting and voting accordingly. These are people who do not care about us, do not care about our families, our neighbors, our communities, or our country at large.
Yeah. I truly believe that President Biden has mental decline, showing signs of dementia. In just the last day or so, he came out and publicly called for the arrest and jailing of Donald Trump within 2 weeks of the presidential election. Kamala Harris is refusing to walk that back or disagree with it. What are your thoughts on him coming out and openly talking about this right before a presidential election? Listen up, homeowners. When is the last time you checked the title on your house? The legal document proving that you own it? If your answer is never, you should know about a fast-growing scam the FBI calls house stealing. It's shockingly easy for criminals to forge a document called a quitclaim deed. They transfer the home out of your name into their own, and you don't even know it's happened. Here's how it works. Scammers create a fake version of your signature, buy a notary stamp online, and take it down to the county recorder, and boom, suddenly your house no longer belongs to you. But guess what? They're not after your house. They want the equity or the money in your house. They cleverly take out loans against your house, leaving you with a financial and legal nightmare. But you can protect yourself from this devastating scam with triple lock protection from HomeTitleLock.com. Start by checking if your title is still in your name. Visit HomeTitleLock.com and enter your address for a free title scan. Now, you're going to need to use promo code Gardner, but this will also get you a free 30-day trial of triple lock protection. Don't wait. Visit HomeTitleLock.com today and use code Gardner for that free 30-day trial. All right, now get back to what you were saying, Lee.
Well, I mean, they've been going after Donald Trump since. I mean, again, what we call the campaign of lawfare did not start with the Mar-a-Lago raid, right? I mean, this started in 2016. As I explained in Disappearing the President, this started with Russiagate, and it started. They had Donald Trump, they had his campaign, they were investigating it. That's lawfare. They moved it to the Mueller special counsel investigation. That's lawfare. The 2 impeachments, lawfare, right? So this has been going on for quite a while. So the idea that Joe Biden is articulating it now, I mean, it's appalling, but Americans can hardly be surprised that this is what's in Joe Biden's heart and mind. Right, that they should put Donald Trump in jail and throw away the key. I mean, this also, it's an index of the desperation of the Democratic Party that they are saying these things out loud right now, without any shame at all.
Yeah. How about I don't know if you saw this or not, but NBC News just interviewed Kamala Harris. They said, when did you start to notice his mental decline? Yeah. She leaned into her lie that she never saw it, that he was always capable. And they said, like, really? You never saw it? Do you believe that she would rather look like she didn't observe that than tell the truth that she covered it up until they used it against him to make her the crowned front runner for the Democrat Party?
I think it's to be expected that she would lie about it at that point, especially in front of someone like NBC News, because they all lied about it. Stephen, I'm sure you were among the tens of millions of Americans, especially Republican voters and reasonable people, who looked at the Joe Biden campaign in 2020 and said, Biden was never particularly loving and warm figure, but he's totally lost it at this point. He's ranting like a madman. We've seen the memes. We saw the different video accounts of what the Biden campaign was up to. They ran that campaign out of a basement because they didn't want him in front of other people, right? Because they were afraid he might fall apart. So the idea that Harris never noticed what was going on is absurd. Everyone saw what was going on. It's just that they could count on the protection of media outlets like NBC. I mean, that was kind of the big joke about when they moved Biden out, that the press was incensed. They were demanding Biden be moved out. Well, what happened is quite obvious. The press was ashamed in front of their pro-Trump family members, right? For the last several years, Trump supporters at Thanksgiving dinners around the country have been saying, "Boy, your man Joe Biden has lost it." And what were they doing? The Biden supporters had to defend Joe Biden. No, he's as sharp as ever. He's sharp as a tack. He blew up Nord Stream 2. He's taking it to Vladimir Putin, and that was the line until they were exposed for peddling nonsense. So as long as Kamala Harris will be protected by the media, she's much better off lying than saying, I knew that I was running with an empty shell of a candidate in 2020. It was embarrassing for me when he got the nomination. We talked and he was incoherent. So. Yeah. Yeah. None of this is a surprise at this point, tragically.
Yeah, no, it's almost like they were using her as their fact checker. Like, hey, we've been saying he was attacked. Oh, our fact checker, the vice president, she agrees with us. Although I thought their follow-up question was actually a very good question. It was, well, if there was no mental decline and he's as sharp as you say, then why isn't he running for president? And she was like, she did not know how to respond to that.
Well, that is a good question, and that is a good follow-up, and that hits a very sensitive spot in the Democratic Party. And again, this is something I'm sorry, I'm going to keep talking about the book, but it's the book is really a comprehensive account of what's happened the last 8 years. So this is just a quick intro. So it's about the operation, the ongoing Get Trump operation, from Russiagate to the assassination attempts. That's the picture on the cover. Again, it's Trump at the Butler, PA rally, standing up and fight, fight, fight. The other thing that the book does, it explains who's been managing the Get Trump operation. And that person is Donald Trump's predecessor, Barack Obama. And Donald Trump identified the culprit with a March 2017 tweet saying, I just found out that Obama had my phones wiretapped. I was wiretapped at Trump Tower. So Donald Trump is known for 8 years who's been running the Get Trump operation, right? That brings me back into what you're talking about with Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris is Barack Obama's candidate, right? That Barack Obama wanted her in 2016. He was driving, and I report this in the book. I explain this in the book. He was driving all sorts of donors, all sorts of attention to Kamala Harris in 2016. Harris bombed with voters, but she was hated by voters. All right. So that gave the opening to Joe Biden right there. The fact that Kamala Harris was out before Christmas time, melted down, but that also opened up the VP spot for her. So the reason that Obama put her into the VP spot was precisely for this contingency. There was going to be some point when Joe Biden was going to be pushed aside to make room for Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris is the candidate of the leader of the Democratic Party, who is Barack Obama, not Joe Biden. It's Barack Obama. So the NBC following up with that question saying, well, why are you the candidate then if Joe Biden was fine? The real answer, which of course Harris would not give, the real answer is because I'm Obama's candidate and this is how Obama wants it.
Interesting. Okay. That I didn't connect those dots because as you know, this summer, Obama really was dragging his feet on making her he wanted, I don't know if it was all pretend or for a show, but he wanted to have some kind of actual Democratic situation where before their convention, people voted, even if it was rushed. But I think you bring up a really good point. I forgot that he had backed her so heavily, and he was against Joe Biden running for office, which is why he supported Hillary Clinton in 2016.
Right. That the account, I know the different accounts you're referring to, saying that Obama wanted wanted a more choice for people. I believe that's inaccurate. I guess if I were a Democrat, I would call it disinformation. No, Barack Obama has wanted Kamala Harris since 2020. Right. That's his candidate. And he was the one. Remember that Jill Biden in 2020 was outraged that Kamala Harris wound up being the vice presidential candidate, right? She called, Kamala Harris called Joe Biden a racist during the debates. So Jill Biden was very upset. But the reason that Kamala Harris was in there was because she is Barack Obama's candidate, right? You can argue, I'm not saying that this is necessarily the case, but you can argue that this is precisely the only scenario that would have allowed a Harris candidacy to wait until 100 days left in the campaign and to say, we're moving out Biden. There's no time to bring in anyone else. Kamala Harris is coming in an emergency situation, and we know exactly how to sell her, how to push her past the American people. I think I think that's actually I think that's actually what went down. I think there is no indication aside from there's no indication aside from different stories that make the Democrats look good. There's no indication that they wanted an open convention, that they wanted to leave it to August to find out who their candidate was. Obama wanted Harris. Obama has Harris. Whether Obama is now happy with Harris is a separate question.
Yeah, well, he must see her as a better puppet that he can control. Otherwise, why put up with her? I do agree. I've been saying this on my show. They waited till the very last minute because they knew they couldn't get her through the primaries.
Right.
They knew they couldn't get her past Iowa and South Carolina and New Hampshire. And so they move up this debate over on CNN to June because they also knew that they weren't going to get Biden out. Biden wasn't going along with Obama's plan. Tell my audience about your book, The Plot Against the President, because you've been studying this, these coups and the deceitfulness that happens in Washington, D.C. in order to position the person you want. Tell us about that book for a minute.
Well, Plot Against the President was published in 2019. And that was made, as you mentioned, as you kindly mentioned, that you and your wife made the movie, watched the movie, and I hope you enjoyed it. The movie came out in 2020, and Plot Against the President was largely the story of then Congressman Devin Nunes and how his investigation really uncovered this scandal in detail. Now, what my new book, Disappearing, here we go again, Disappearing the President, out with Encounter Books, ready for release on Amazon October 29th. What the new book is about, again, it's a comprehensive account of what's happened the last 8 years. And again, it goes through Russiagate, through the 2 assassination attempts. What it focuses on is the campaign of censorship, the campaign of surveillance, and the campaign of political violence targeting Donald Trump. And what I do through extensive research and interviews, I interview Donald Trump, a lot of great interviews with very interesting people, very insightful people. Devin Nunes is in here as well. Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, FBI whistleblower Stephen Friend, journalist, colleague, awesome writer Julie Kelly. So there's a lot of really interesting and important information in the book. What I show is through the interviews and through my a lot of research, I show how all of these different campaigns targeting Donald Trump, his aides, and supporters originates with Barack Obama. How the campaign of political violence started with Obama's CIA director John Brennan when he issued an intelligence community assessment in January 2017, saying that Donald Trump came to the White House thanks to Vladimir Putin, right? That was the government's imprimatur on an information operation. This was very dangerous. It not only undermined Trump's presidency, most significantly, it cut the country in half, right? Because it wasn't just saying that Trump was a Russian agent. The point was also to delegitimize half the country, saying that they were disloyal because they had voted for the agent of a foreign power. So that's really where the campaign of political violence begins. Of course, the press has had a very large role, delegitimizing Trump, calling him Hitler, calling him a fascist, a Nazi, a Putin stooge, all of these different things. But it really starts with Barack Obama in January 2017. Same thing with the censorship campaign. Starts in November 2016, shortly after Trump's victory, and Barack Obama reads out Mark Zuckerberg, CEO and founder of Facebook, for not censoring Trump. That's really where the censorship campaign begins. And you'll remember in 2016 and 2017 that a lot of the left blamed Facebook and Zuckerberg for allowing Trump to win. So that's where the censorship begins. The surveillance campaign begins against Trump. That also begins with Barack Obama, his spy chiefs, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, John Brennan, with the Trump campaign under surveillance. So what we've seen the last 8 years here as Americans, as the pillars of our republic have been attacked, this campaign this ongoing operation was initiated by Donald Trump's predecessor, Barack Obama. So that's really the heart. That's really the heart of the book, explaining what's happened the last 8 years, putting a name to it, because I think that talking about it in terms of the deep state or the system or however we want to talk about it is not helpful. Those are abstractions, and we need to win in order to save the republic, in order to fight for the republic. We need to figure out who's behind it, on behalf of what interests, what causes, who's paying for it. And that's what I do. I put a name on the people who are driving the anti-Trump operation and the attack on the republic. And most of the names, Stephen, you and your audience will recognize them. There's hardly any surprise. I just identify them all and say, here are the people who are part of this operation, whether it's George Soros, whether it's a number of Obama-affiliated lawyers like Norm Eisen, Mark Elias, Andrew Weissman. So that's really the core of the book right there.
Okay. As you were talking, it provoked a thought. If Barack Obama and the Democrat Party really shamed and humiliated Facebook and squarely put the blame of Donald Trump beating Hillary onto Facebook and Zuckerberg, could that be why 4 years later somehow they convince him to part ways with $400 million into the 2020 election? Like, Zuckerberg, this is your way of atoning for your sin.
Exactly.
Just put up a $400 million pledge to make democracy strong, free and fair elections. We're not going to tell you that 90% of that's going to go to swing states to get Biden elected. Any chance that that's how they got him? Who parts with almost $500 million for no reason?
Well, Stephen, that's exactly how I see it, and that's the case that I make. That they made him pay. Facebook has long been a problem for the Obama faction, right? Why? Because Facebook has a more conservative audience. First of all, it's enormous, but also it's for older people, right? TikTok is for young people. Facebook is used by older people who want to follow their grandkids. Look, there he is at his latest Little League game, or look, there's our granddaughter at a birthday party, right? And because there are older people, it tends to be a more conservative audience, and so that's one of the reasons that that the Obama faction has tried to keep Zuckerberg in line, and they're still furious about 2016. And you'll remember, Stephen, it's fascinating. Even after they billed Zuckerberg nearly $500 million for the 2020 election, what did they do? Within a year, they sent the fake whistleblower after him, right? Saying preposterous things, saying, "Oh, Facebook, as we found out, is bad for teenage girls," right? And they had this testimony in front of the Senate. Now, you would like to think that at least one senator would have said, "Well, look, I actually happen to know that young girls aren't on Facebook. The problem for teenage girls would be TikTok or something like that, or some other social media platforms. How do I know that? Because I use Facebook. Facebook is for old people. So this whole thing is a crazy setup, but it shows you, look, I'm not saying Zuckerberg is a great guy. I'm not saying he's one of the champions of the republic, but I am saying he has come under attack, not as badly as Elon Musk now, but he has come under attack by the Obama faction for precisely this reason, and they keep trying to bring him into line.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like this long game revenge attack. Do you? I don't mean to keep making this about Mark Zuckerberg, but I've been fascinated. I've been fascinated by this journey, Lee, where now I think he realized that they were going to try to ruin him and his business and his life as revenge. So what does he do? He throws himself before Congress earlier this year, where he says, listen, the FBI, the CIA, they're pressuring me. I need Congress to help me. And now he's hired someone to help him better understand conservative values. He's left the Democrat Party. He says he's now an independent libertarian. He must be scared that they're going to continue to harass him and his business, Facebook.
Well, I mean, I hope. And in my first chapter here, I have, it's an interview with Donald Trump, and he's talking about Mark Zuckerberg, and how Zuckerberg was in contact with Donald Trump a lot during his presidency. And he said, hey, you're number one on Facebook. And, Trump was happy to hear it, but not surprised, as he knows the kind of media clout he has. And then, of course, Zuckerberg threw Trump off of Facebook. I'm hopeful, Stephen, that what Mark Zuckerberg has said means that he will maintain an even playing field at Facebook. But it's hard to know right now. I mean, remember what he did. He wrote a letter. He dictated a letter, and he sent the letter to Capitol Hill. Said, "Yeah, I'm sorry. Here's what happened. We shouldn't have done it, but I did it." And Congress so far is not holding him accountable, and writing a letter without doing anything about it that doesn't necessarily signal contrition. Or that he's striking out on a new path. I mean, I certainly hope he does. And if Donald Trump wins, then I assume that Mr. Zuckerberg will try to maintain an even playing field. But remember, there's all sorts of pressure on these. Again, I don't mean to excuse Mark Zuckerberg. I'm just saying there's a tremendous amount of pressure, political and financial pressure, on these guys coming from the Obama faction. And as I, again, document pretty clearly here, I'm not trying to make a hero out of the big tech guys, but I think a lot of these people are, in their heart of hearts, actually libertarian, and they wanted to have an even playing field. And they didn't necessarily ask to have all the FBI agents or CIA officers come over and staff their social media platforms, but they're there. And these guys are basically spying on these companies. They're spying on Americans too, but also they're keeping these companies in line with the Obama faction. Again, I'm hopeful about Mark Zuckerberg, but time will tell. Time will tell, as will the results of the November 2024 election.
Yeah, it's interesting how many of these big leaders are having private conversations with Donald Trump. I didn't know any of those private conversations between Trump and Zuckerberg. Yet just this week on the Patrick Bet-David podcast, PBD Valuetainment podcast, Trump said, just 3 hours ago, I was on the phone with the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, telling me that he needs me to help him with a $15 billion fine from the European Union. I mean, a tremendous amounts of money for allowing freedom of speech and different things. Right. I don't know if you saw this or not, Lee, but over on the Atlantic magazine, they recently did a hit piece desperately trying to link Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler, saying Trump thinks like Hitler. Trump has similar tactics to Hitler. He dislikes Jews like Hitler, and Donald Trump is a big fan of Adolf Hitler. Is this the left just like running out of original ideas on how to tarnish Donald Trump? Because it seems like everyone's final gasp when they're losing an argument is, you're like the Nazis, right?
Yeah, right.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I know the article you're talking about over at the Atlantic, and they quote they're talking to a number of retired general officers like Mark Milley and like John Kelly. And John Kelly, of course, was also Trump's chief of staff for a while. Previously, he'd been head of DHS. And actually, this story concerns me an awful lot. Because what my research has shown, and again, which I account for in Disappearing the President, what my research shows is that a lot of post-election contingency planning from the left. So the way that I see this story is it's not really a last shot at Trump, before November 5. What it really is, it's part of post-contingency planning. Because they're talking to a whole bunch of general officers, I think what it's trying to do is shape the post-election environment. If you look at some of the different scenarios, again, which are described in Disappearing the President, what they talk about is massive amounts of, they assume a Trump victory, by the way, which is interesting. They assume a Trump victory. And in the aftermath of a Trump victory, they posit widespread violence throughout American cities, just enormous amounts of violence, so bad that Trump is compelled to invoke the Insurrection Act. At that point, some of his military officers refuse to obey his orders, at which point Trump dismisses some of them and brings in others who will obey his orders. But what that means is a split in the U.S. military. So I'm very concerned about this, that's what that story represents. It represents part of this scenario to split the U.S. military in the event of a Donald Trump victory, and in the aftermath of that victory, and with widespread violence tearing apart American cities. So it's that story has me very, very concerned, because again, I don't see it as something shaping voters' minds right now, but what it's a message for senior military officers. Either you are on the side of freedom or you're on the side of Hitler. So remember, the big guys, the general officer, retired general officers, are all signaling Trump is Hitler. They're all bad guys. So when push comes to shove, what side are you going to be on? Are you going to be with Hitler, or are you going to be with us, the good guys? It's a very, very worrisome story, and I'm really glad you brought it up so we had a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I brought it up too, because I was only thinking about it on the front end of they're like, this is one last gasp. I've run out of rebuttals or quick-witted replies. He's a Nazi, you know.
Right.
I thought it was maybe that, but I see what you're saying. And in fact, like the first week that Donald Trump was in office in January of 2017, there was a story where all of a sudden at this Jewish cemetery, there were swastikas spray painted and all of this anti-Semitic stuff. And then boom, his presidency kicks off with, there would never have been anti-Semitism except for under Donald Trump, right? And I think you're right. I think that they're trying to set up this post-election narrative in order to divide the people. Ooh, man, you're good. I like that. I mean, you've been studying this stuff, so you understand it. As you wrote Disappearing the President, was there any particular thing that jumped out at you, or as you started writing it and researching it, you were like, wow, this is a really central part of this story?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's been my thesis for it's been my thesis for several years now, but it's not like it's anything secret. We all see it, that Barack Obama is driving this operation, right? I mean, because he's raising his hand all the time. He's saying, "Hey, it's me," right? And this is what happened when they moved out Biden and brought in Harris. All of Obama's aides are saying, "Yeah, it's Barack, it's President Obama. That's who's doing all of this." You know, so lots of the times though, we're kind of willfully blind to it. I think part of it is because people are afraid of sounding racist by saying it's Obama, or people are afraid of sounding like conspiracy theorists. But I encourage people, hey, when he's saying it's me, when he's taking credit for it, it's okay to say it's him. The thing that surprised me was, again, this has been my thesis for nearly a decade now, right? Going back to 2016. What surprised me was going back and doing the research and finding out how much he is actually in the middle of. It's just astonishing. I mean, he's there all the time. And when it pops up, it's amazing. I'll give you an example. Before he left office in January 2017, he relaxed. He amended an executive order 12333. And what that talks about is the disposition of intelligence and who's allowed to receive certain kinds of intelligence and the different protocols. Prior to this, if you wanted to get intercepts, if you wanted certain kinds of intelligence, most of the intelligence, you had to go to the National Security Agency. You had to go through protocol. It was all recorded. So if you're asking for something, it was on the record. People knew who had it. People knew what was going on. So Obama changed that by amending that executive order. So this intelligence is available to virtually every bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. It's astonishing, right? And as Obama was doing that, there were articles all throughout the left-wing press, like Wired magazine. They're just amazed. Oh my goodness, Obama is doing all of this, and he's leaving it available for Trump to abuse. And now Trump's going to spy on everyone and spread all this intelligence around. And that lasted for about a month and a half, because soon people began to understand, no, actually, the reason that Obama amended that executive order was to be able to provide all of this intelligence, was to allow people to spy on Trump and Trump aides. So that, realizing that, and it was a couple of former FBI agents who pointed that out to me, who brought my attention to the amendment of amending that executive order. And I was really astonished. So again, it's just looking closely and finding out through the interviews and the research, the central role that Barack Obama has played, the shadow president, I call him, that the shadow president has had in collapsing the pillars of the republic.
Yeah. Okay, I have two questions that came to mind. One about Biden and one about George W. Bush. Okay, let's go with Biden first. Why, if it's been proven now that Obama spied on Trump, colluded with Hillary Clinton on the whole Russia thing, why shouldn't the American people assume that Joseph Robinette Biden and Kamala Harris aren't setting similar booby traps for a Trump 47 presidency?
Yeah, very good point. I think it's quite likely that they have been spying on Trump. I mean, frankly, we don't know. We don't know if the FBI's surveillance of Donald Trump actually ever stopped, right? I mean, we know what we know it was supposed to have ended at a certain point in 2017, but we don't know that for a fact, right? And as Kash Patel has told me, and he's said publicly before, so they never close those. The FBI never closes those counterintelligence investigations. It's quite likely that they're still spying on Donald Trump on those authorities, or they may have new authorities to spy on Donald Trump. We see all of this stuff coming out about the Iranians are hacking the Trump team's communications. Well, I mean, do we know it? Do we know it's the Iranians? Is someone else actually hacking, excuse me, Stephen, the Trump team's communications? So we know that Donald Trump has not taken intelligence briefings, right? He's been quite clear about this. Why? Because he doesn't trust the services right now. He doesn't trust the Biden administration. And we know that in 2016, when he was first on campaign for the White House, the FBI was using those intelligence briefings to collect intelligence on Donald Trump. So you raise a really good point, Stephen. Well, we don't know that spying on Donald Trump has ever stopped. And we can be certain, if Donald Trump is elected, that there will be hostiles throughout the intelligence services, throughout Washington, at the FBI, at DHS, at the Central Intelligence Agency. And again, I really cover all of this. Who were the different figures who acted against Donald Trump starting in 2016, whether they were people at the CIA, like Director Gina Haspel, whether it was James Comey, then director of the FBI. But we can be certain that there are going to be lots of bad actors. If Donald Trump is reelected, there will be bad actors throughout the bureaucracies looking to target him again.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's talked about firing a lot of them, replacing a lot of them. These agencies fight tooth and nail to continue to exist, keep their budgets growing. And okay, the other question, and I don't know that you have an answer on this, but I've been so curious as to why George W. Bush ends his presidency and essentially disappears into history, and Barack Obama stays very much involved in controlling his party, influencing his party, trying to control the outcome of his party. Any thoughts on that? Was George W. Bush just so embarrassed about 9/11 and being tricked by Dick Cheney about going to war in the Middle East? Your thoughts?
No, everyone goes away. George W. Bush, for all of his many faults and flaws, George W. Bush was a normal American president in that respect. He went away. They all go away. Why did they go away? They go away not least because they don't want to give any evidence, any impression that they might be interfering with the transfer of executive authority. You go away once you're finished to let your successor take center stage. And, you know, most former presidents are even very careful about criticizing their successors. You know, George W. Bush didn't do it an awful lot with Barack Obama. Most presidents simply don't. Barack Obama, he's the exception. Right, what George W. Bush did by fading away, that's the normal thing. Jimmy Carter, the 100-year-old Jimmy Carter, did the same. Most of these people go away; they leave Washington. Barack Obama, I probably am not the first person saying this on your show, Stephen, but Barack Obama is the first president in a century who stayed in Washington, D.C. The last one was Woodrow Wilson, and Wilson had a stroke. Wilson could not leave Washington. Wilson was incapacitated for the last year and a half of his presidency. The White House was run by Mrs. Wilson, the First Lady. So before Wilson, no one stayed in Washington. Barack Obama is the exception. That's why Barack Obama's biographer, Pulitzer Prize-winning David Garrow, says Barack Obama is not normal. Not as a politician and not as a human being. The problem, the larger problem is not just Obama, Stephen. The larger problem is our the press, or what passes for our press these days. This is extremely odd what Obama's done, but none of them will remark on this. None of them have pointed out what Obama has done simply by staying in Washington. This is very, very odd. And by the way, Obama made this decision very early on in his second term, so everyone knew what was happening. You can go back and find press reports as early as January 2013 saying that Barack Obama is planning on staying after his second term here. So why was this never strange for the press? I mean, as I said, no one else has ever done it before. Why don't they bring these things up? So again, it's what's really been happening here is something that people is something that the left knows about, but they don't talk about it, and it's something that we on the right do know, have observed, and we should talk about it because that's the core of the issue right now. This in itself is a violation of the norms and standards of our republic. Staying in Washington like that. They always talk about January 6th and the peaceful transfer of power. Well, not only is that garbage, the way they describe January 6th, but the way that Obama himself interfered with the transfer of executive authority. And again, staying in Washington is itself a violation of that protocol.
Yeah. I assume Joseph Robinette Biden won't stay in D.C. I mean, he spent 45% of his presidency on vacation in Delaware anyway, right?
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Just following the pattern there. Lee, this has been an awesome conversation. I appreciate you coming on to the show. If people want to, I know Disappearing the President is coming out very, very soon.
Yes.
How can people get a copy of that? When is the official release date?
I'll just hold it up one more time. Sorry to be a nuisance, but really, the cover's beautiful. My wife is very happy with it, and she's hard to please. She thinks it's great. Disappearing the President. You can get it directly from the publisher at Encounter Books. Amazon release date is October 29th. So we're very excited for that. October 29th is the official release date. And Stephen, it was really a lot of fun talking to you. And I really appreciate you having me on for such a long and interesting conversation. And I I think it was great. All of
Yeah.
the really important stuff and really interesting stuff we got to talk about today. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I liked it. We got to tease out Obama and Mark Zuckerberg, because these are things that I have wanted to better understand. So I appreciate you.
You are going to like Disappearing the President. Seriously, I think you're going to enjoy it, because I mean, again, it's a pretty comprehensive account of what's happened in the last 8 years, and it addresses those questions that are on your mind and the minds of lots of us right now.
Great. Well, I'm excited. I hope it's a mega success. Lee, thank you so much for coming on. I'll put a direct link down below as well to your X account. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too, Stephen. Take care.